Simone Biles is now back at home resting after what she calls, quote, one of the scariest experiences of her life. Of course, we all know who Simone is. She is the GOAT, one of the greatest Olympic athletes of all time. And she shared this news of her near-death experience in a post that she put online.
Imagine being one of the most decorated athletes in the history of human sport, having conquered every stage the world could possibly put in front of you, and then finding yourself alone at home in Texas, in a hospital bed, posting photographs of medical wristbands to Instagram because you almost died and there was nobody nearby to hold your hand. That is exactly where Simone Biles found herself in early June of 2026. Not in an arena, not under stadium lights with thousands of fans cheering, just quietly, frighteningly alone, facing one of the scariest moments of her life. And the world only found out because she chose to tell us herself. For someone who has spent the better part of 2 decades carrying the weight of expectations that would crush most people, this latest chapter is another entry in a story that has never been simple, never been straightforward, and never been anything close to what people on the outside imagine a champion's life to look like. Simone Biles is not simply a gymnast. She is a survivor, a trailblazer, and a human being who has been tested by life in ways that go far beyond anything that happens inside a competition gymnasium. She has been tested by a childhood that would have broken most people's spirits before they ever had the chance to discover what they were capable of. She has been tested by an institution that failed her in one of the most fundamental ways an institution can fail a young athlete. She has been tested by her own mind and her own body on the grandest stage in global sport. And now, as she rests at home recovering from something she describes as a near-death experience, the world is watching again, holding its breath again, wondering once more just how much one person can absorb and still come out the other side. The news broke on June 6, 2026, not through any official press release or polished statement from her management team, but through her Instagram stories, the same unfiltered, personal platform where she has always preferred to speak directly to the people who follow her journey. What she shared stopped the internet almost instantly. Biles posted photographs of multiple hospital patient wristbands stacked around her forearm, and alongside those images, she wrote words that sent a wave of genuine alarm through her global fanbase. She said she was not typically one to share things like this because she valued her privacy, but that almost dying had not been on her agenda that week. She called it one of, if not the scariest experience of her life. And then she added the detail that made the whole situation feel even more isolating. Her husband, Indianapolis Colts safety Jonathan Owens, had been away in Indiana for the team's off-season practices when the emergency happened. She was alone, and whatever unfolded, it was serious enough to put her in the hospital and keep her largely bedridden for the days that followed. In subsequent posts over the hours and days after that first revelation, Biles filled in a little more of the picture through images rather than words. She shared photographs of elaborate flower arrangements sent by friends and family. She posted a quiet bedroom image of herself resting alongside her 2 French bulldogs, Lilo and Rambo. And nestled within those images was a screenshot from her Oura Ring wearable fitness tracker that showed a resting heart rate of 126 beats per minute. That number is important context. For medical professionals, a resting heart rate consistently above 100 beats per minute is classified as tachycardia, indicating the heart is working harder at rest than it should be. A reading of 126 on a recovery tracker, while not definitive of any single diagnosis, points to the body being under significant internal strain, the kind of strain associated with infection, elevated inflammation, cardiac irregularities, blood pressure changes, blood clots, or any number of acute medical conditions. The tracker data confirmed what her words had already communicated. This was not a minor incident. On June 7th, responding directly to speculation that had spread rapidly across social media platforms, Biles clarified on X that the emergency had been health-related and was not the result of any accident, injury from physical activity, or external violence. That was the full extent of additional clinical detail made public. No diagnosis. No treating physician statement. No hospital named. She promised, in her own words, to explain sooner or later. And that is entirely consistent with the boundary she has always maintained between sharing her truth and surrendering her privacy completely. She has never owed anyone a medical report. What she offered was already more than most athletes in her position would ever choose to share, and she offered it on her own terms, in the way that felt right to her. What gives this emergency particular weight is the physical context surrounding it. After the 2024 Paris Olympics, where she delivered one of the most stunning comeback performances in sports history, Biles was remarkably open about what competing at that level had cost her body. In an interview with the French outlet L'Equipe published in April of 2025, she described the moment the Paris Games concluded. She said she returned to the Olympic Village, stepped into an elevator, and her body simply gave out beneath her. She was sick for 10 days. The physical preparation required to compete at an Olympic level had accumulated to the point where her system needed to shut down and recover once the adrenaline was gone. She flew home early to rest. And even months later, she described running sprints in her garden with friends and dealing with aches and pains for 3 full days afterward, a humbling reminder that the body eventually presents a bill for everything it has been asked to carry. At those Paris 2024 Games, what Biles delivered was breathtaking by any measure. She won gold in the team all-around, gold in the individual all-around, gold in vault, and silver in floor exercise. She brought her total Olympic medal count to 11, 7 gold, 2 silver, and 2 bronze across 3 separate games spanning Rio 2016, Tokyo 2020, and Paris 2024. She became the most decorated American gymnast in Olympic history. At 27, she became the oldest woman in 72 years to win the Olympic all-around title. She broke records that had stood for generations. She competed through a calf injury that required her ankle to be wrapped during some finals. She did all of this while managing the physical and psychological residue of everything she had already been through over the course of her career. And when it was over, she stepped into an elevator and collapsed. That level of cumulative physical output does not simply reset between major competitions. It accumulates across years, across training cycles, across the thousands upon thousands of high-impact landings and rotational repetitions that make up the daily reality of elite gymnastics at the level Biles has maintained. She turned 29 in March of 2027. The question of what repeated exposure to those forces does to a body over time is not hypothetical. It is a clinical reality that athletes in physically demanding sports navigate throughout their late 20s and into their 30s. Whatever the specific nature of the June 2026 emergency turns out to be, it is not occurring in isolation from that physical history. But to fully understand who Simone Biles is and what she has navigated to reach this point in her life, you have to go back much further than Paris or Tokyo. You have to begin in Columbus, Ohio, in 1997, with a childhood that most people would never know how to survive. She was born to a mother named Shannon Biles who struggled with substance abuse issues severe enough that she was unable to provide stable care for Simone and her siblings during their early years. The family was formally separated, and Simone and her younger sister entered the foster care system, moving between caregivers, experiencing the disruption and uncertainty that defines life inside the child welfare structure when a family has fractured. For a small child in the mid-90s Midwest, that kind of instability leaves marks that can last a lifetime. Changing routines, absent permanence, the emotional weight of not knowing what comes next, these are not small things. They are foundational disruptions that shape how a person develops and how they learn to relate to the world around them. What changed everything was her maternal grandfather Ron Biles, a former Air Force sergeant, and his wife Nellie Biles, who worked as a nurse. They stepped in and adopted Simone and her sister, relocating the family to Spring, Texas, in the greater Houston area. That decision gave Simone something she had never had before: legal permanence, a consistent home environment, reliable schooling, and access to the kind of stable structure that childhood development requires. The Biles household was disciplined and supportive in equal measure. Ron and Nellie prioritized both education and athletic development, creating the conditions that allowed Simone to actually progress without the kinds of disruptions that often derail young athletes during critical development years. It was in Spring, Texas, that gymnastics entered her life, not through careful planning or deliberate strategy, but through the most ordinary of circumstances. A daycare field trip took her to a local gym. Coaches immediately noticed something in the way she moved: the natural athleticism, the physical intuition that some athletes simply carry in their bodies from the very beginning. What followed was a gradual progression through local programs that eventually led her to Bannon's Gymnastics and a coach named Amy Bowman, under whose guidance Biles developed the technical foundation that her entire elite career would later be built upon. By the time she entered adolescence, the path was already clear. She was competing at elite levels in a state that had developed some of the country's most concentrated high-performance gymnastics infrastructure. She was being watched. And then she arrived on the international stage, and the sport was never quite the same again. The 2013 World Artistic Gymnastics Championships in Antwerp, Belgium, was where it truly began for the wider world. A 16-year-old Simone Biles qualified for every major final and walked away with 4 medals in her debut at that level, including gold in the all-around and gold on floor exercise. She won the all-around by nearly a full point, a margin that in elite gymnastics is not close at all. From that moment, the trajectory was unmistakable. World titles accumulated. Apparatus gold stacked up. Difficulty scores in her routines reached levels that required federations to rethink what their scoring systems were designed to capture. She introduced skills that were so technically complex that they were officially named after her when she completed them in major international competition, including the Yurchenko double pike vault, an element that analysts had considered impractical for women's competition, before she simply went ahead and did it. She won 4 gold medals and a bronze at the 2016 Rio Olympics. She reshaped the ceiling of what women's gymnastics could look like at its highest expression. But even across those years of extraordinary dominance, something was happening that Biles and the other athletes around her were not yet able to speak about publicly. The USA Gymnastics Organization, the governing body overseeing the national team, employed a physician named Larry Nassar, who abused athletes under the pretense of providing legitimate medical treatment over the course of many years. His crimes unfolded inside the tightly controlled pipeline of national team camps and Olympic preparation cycles, environments where athletes depended on team medical staff, and where reporting misconduct carried perceived consequences for careers and competitive opportunities. Nassar was eventually convicted in both federal and state courts. He received a 60-year federal prison sentence and a state sentence of 40 to 175 years. More than 150 athletes came forward with impact statements during the sentencing proceedings. Simone Biles was among those survivors. In January of 2018, she publicly confirmed that she had experienced abuse under Nassar's care. The statement came at the height of the legal proceedings and placed her among the most high-profile voices calling for accountability from the institutions that had failed to protect the athletes within their care. In congressional hearings in Washington, she and other survivors spoke with precision and clarity about the structural failures inside USA Gymnastics, the delayed responses to complaints, the inadequate reporting mechanisms, the culture of prioritizing competitive results and organizational reputation over athlete safety. Biles did not soften those hearings. She named what had happened, and she insisted that the conversation extend beyond one individual's criminal responsibility to the systemic failures that had allowed it to persist. It was one of the most significant moments of athlete advocacy in modern American sports history. The Tokyo Olympics in 2021 delivered yet another test, one that unfolded publicly and in real time in front of a global audience. During the women's team final on July 27, 2021, Biles completed a vault attempt that landed below her usual standard and then stepped back from the competition. She was experiencing the twistus, a condition specific to rotational sports involving a temporary but serious disconnection between a gymnast's spatial awareness and their physical execution during aerial skills. In a sport where athletes are several meters off the ground mid-skill and need precise body position awareness to land safely, losing that internal orientation is a genuine safety risk. It is not a matter of nerves or competitive hesitation. It is a neurological disconnection that can result in catastrophic injury on landing if a gymnast attempts to continue. Biles withdrew from the team final and from multiple subsequent apparatus finals, returning only for the balance beam final on August 3rd, where she delivered a composed and controlled performance that earned her the bronze medal. The public reaction covered the full spectrum. Many supporters, including sports medicine professionals and psychologists who understood the physiological reality of what she had described, called the decision a historic moment for athlete welfare and the conversation around mental health in elite sport. Others were more critical, questioning whether an athlete of her stature should have stepped back from Olympic competition. Biles absorbed all of it. In the months that followed, she provided more context. The twistus had not appeared from a single isolated moment. They were the convergence of multiple overlapping pressures, the cumulative psychological weight of years at the top of the most demanding levels of the sport, the disruption of a pandemic-delayed games staged without spectators in an atmosphere of strict isolation protocols, and the unresolved psychological effects of the abuse she had endured within USA Gymnastics. All of those threads had pulled tight at the same moment, in the same arena, during the most watched competition on ice. Her comeback from Tokyo was not loud or rushed. It was methodical, personal, and built around her relationship with coaches Laurent and Cecile Landy, her continued work with a therapist, something she has spoken about without embarrassment or qualification, and a patient rebuilding of competitive confidence. She did not rush herself back into competition simply to prove a point or silence her critics. She took the time she needed, returned to training when her body and mind signaled they were ready, and then she stepped back onto the competitive floor and reminded everyone why she had redefined the sport in the first place. During this period of rebuilding, her personal life also continued to develop in the public eye. She had begun dating Jonathan Owens, a safety who has played in the NFL, in 2020. Their relationship became public later that year and steadily attracted more attention as Biles navigated the aftermath of Tokyo and her gradual return to competition. The couple became engaged in 2022 and married in April of 2023 in a private ceremony, later celebrating with a larger event among friends and family. As both of their athletic profiles continued to rise, Biles back at the top of gymnastics, Owens working through his NFL career, their relationship drew consistent public interest. That interest was not always comfortable. In early 2024, a podcast interview in which Owens made comments about his relationship with Biles generated significant online debate. Biles was direct in defending her husband publicly, noting that the reaction had amplified a narrative that did not reflect the reality of their relationship. It was a reminder of the particular challenge that comes with being two high-profile athletes in a shared public life, where individual moments get stripped of context and turned into something the people involved barely recognize. Despite those pressures and the scrutiny that has followed her across virtually every aspect of both her professional and personal life, Biles has maintained a consistent and clear message across her public platform. She has spoken openly about therapy, about the importance of mental health care, about the decision to protect her own well-being even when doing so invites criticism. She has been transparent about cosmetic procedures she chose to undergo in 2025, explaining to People magazine that openness is simply part of who she is, that while winning Olympic medals is not something most people can relate to, the everyday human experiences of how people feel about themselves, what they go through, and how they share honestly with others, that is where real connection lies. It is a philosophy of public communication that has made her one of the most genuinely trusted voices in modern sport, not despite her vulnerability, but because of it. By the time she arrived in Paris in 2024, she was ready. More than ready. She was dominant. She was joyful. She was historic. And then she came home and her body gave out. Now, in June of 2026, she is resting in Spring, Texas, recovering from something that came close enough to ending her life that she felt compelled to tell the world about it, in her own understated, honest way. Her husband was in Indianapolis. No formal diagnosis has been shared. Her heart rate was running at 126 beats per minute at rest. She has promised to explain when she is ready. The 2028 Los Angeles Olympics looms as an open question. She has said publicly and repeatedly that she is undecided. She has acknowledged that her body is aging, that the 4-year commitment required to compete at an Olympic level is not something she takes lightly, and that she needs more time, mental and physical recovery time, before she can give anyone a real answer. In April of 2026, at the Laureus World Sports Awards in Madrid, one of her last significant public appearances before the June emergency, she presented a Lifetime Achievement Award to gymnastics legend Nadia Comaneci, a passing of the torch in its own quiet way. She told reporters that 2028 felt far away, that she had felt her body aging during Paris, and that for now she was simply focused on living her life. Just weeks before that event, she and Owens had attended a St. Louis Cardinals baseball game together, posting photographs from the outing on a Thursday that would turn out to be her final social media post before the health emergency became public. Life had appeared ordinary. Then it suddenly was not. Whatever she decides about 2028, the decision will be made from a position of hard-won self-knowledge. She knows better than anyone what that commitment costs, what it demands of a body and a mind, and what it takes to stand at the top of a competition floor and perform skills that no one else in the world can match. Whether she chooses to pursue that one more time or steps fully into life after competition, that choice belongs to her, and her alone. But the most honest thing that can be said about Simone Biles right now is this: she has been through more than most people will ever fully understand, and she has faced all of it without pretending any of it was easy. A difficult start in life, an adoption that gave her stability and a future, a rise through gymnastics that rewrote the record books, the revelation of institutional betrayal, a public mental health crisis on the biggest stage in sport, a comeback that defied every expectation, and now, a medical emergency that landed her in a hospital bed, alone, in the middle of the night, posting wristband photographs to Instagram because she wanted the people who cared about her to know she was still here. Things have not been looking good for Simone Biles lately. That is the honest summary. But if her entire story has taught us anything at all, and it has taught us a great deal,